Welcome to Jam Talk, powered by Teach Jam. I am your host, the Instructional Savage, and today we are blessed and favored to be in the presence of Shivy Brooks, one of the most riveting educators in the nation. And we are going to talk today about his work in the classroom as well as his aspirations outside of the classroom. Shivy, welcome to Jam Talk.
Honored to be with you.
We are so honored. The pleasure is all of ours. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing in Atlanta Public Schools?
Yeah. So for those who are meeting me for the first time, my name is Alfred Shivy Brooks. I'm a high school educator. I teach, personal finance, government at Charlestree High School in Riverdale, which is in Clayton County. I am a resident of Atlanta. Who has my late son, Bryce Brooks, attended Maynard Jackson High School. And I've had the opportunity to serve as like a coach and swim instructor and many things for the kids in Atlanta prior to me being the certified teacher I am today. So today we are doing work around Atlanta around education equity. I serve as the education chair for the Georgia NAACP. And I have worked with my family to begin the Bryce Brooks Foundation, which is in the namesake of our late son, which helps to raise money to provide access to free swim lessons for children and adults, as well as free lifeguard certifications and college scholarships for young people. So that's some of the work that we're doing now, which I'm really, really excited about. Because it is a return to the community work that I did before being a teacher, as I was a swim instructor and lifeguard at the YMCA's for like 15 years, until I met my wife, actually.
So Shivy, it sounds like you're an educator, you're a grassroots activist, you're a husband, father, waymaker. There's a lot on your plate already.
Right.
So it's interesting to hear that you want to do more, particularly with the Atlanta Public Schools board. So I did a little research on the board. And in doing that research, it seems like there are some odds against you just by face value, just by looking at you. Just by looking at you. You know why I say that? You know why I say that? Because I saw that there are 9 women on the board. Which is super cool. As a woman, I loved seeing that demographic. I love seeing women in those positions for policy making. But I thought to myself, representation matters, and it's important that there's equity in representation. Right? And with 72% of Atlanta public school students being Black, I saw 4 Black women, and then with I think 51% being male, I did not see a single man. Okay, so I also then wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the demographic of the board, and I found that there is only one former teacher board member. And there is a lot of benefit in cross-sectoral partnerships. So there are some attorneys, some corporate managers, managing partners. But you wouldn't have a tech company without a computer scientist, right? So we can't have, or at least I think, there would be more benefit of a board that had insight of more educators. And the current board member who is a chair is a former teacher, but she's not an active teacher. So at some point, there is the possibility of losing sight of the more present and current needs of the ecosystem.
It's hard to be in touch when you're not there. Shout out to my good friend Ishay Collins, who is the Atlanta Public School Board Chair now, who is a former educator. However, I do think in this time where we're talking about during the pandemic, post-pandemic, education is very different than it has ever been. And if you've not experienced what that's like, it is hard to understand what the needs are today because they're much more unique than they were before. One of the issues that I have about policy and education is that we see consistently that there is a lot of policy about teachers without teachers. A lot of policy about schools without people who actually work in them being a part of the policymaking process. I see this as a real opportunity for us to not only have Black male representation on the board, but also have representation of teachers and educators on our board with me running in this election. It's not lost on me that, 1 in 3 students in Atlanta public schools looks like my son, Bryce. But when you go to the board office, when you go to a board meeting, those boys don't get to see one person who looks like them on their dais. And that has to change. That has to change, especially in a city like Atlanta. Because how do we speak to the needs of people that we don't know? And so as a father, as an educator, I see a real opportunity for us to add value, perspective, insight, authenticity, and being in touch at a time where we need it the most, because there's so many things beyond just curricula that have to be addressed. There's a lot of hard work that we have to do. There's a lot of social work that we have to do for our kids. And it's going to take people who really understand what's happening to make that happen. So prior to me announcing my run for Atlanta Public School Board, there was a rule in place that said that you could not be an active teacher and serve on the Atlanta Public School Board at the same time. And thankfully to many of the Atlanta delegation at the state legislature, Representative Park Cannon and Senator Estevez, two who I'd love to name and shout out, put up legislation to change that rule and now allow teachers to serve on the board and be in the classroom at the same time. And I fully intend to take advantage of that opportunity because I believe that was good policy that is going to lead to much more good policy as educators are now free to use their voices on the board as they should have been the whole while.
I love that. So if you were to be elected to this board for seat 7, you would be the first active teacher board member in Atlanta Public Schools.
In a very long time, yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
That is amazing.
And I would love to see that. I think ultimately, they say the greatest thing that you can do is inspire others. Right? And my hope is that in this run, even just in running itself, that it inspires more educators to put their proverbial hat in the political rings, to be seen and be heard, and to step up and get elected. Teachers really, I mean, if we think about it, teachers are public employees who have the opportunity to have their finger on the pulse of like multiple generations within a community. And you don't get that opportunity in many other job positions. So when you position teachers to help with policy, you now have someone who understands what the kids are needing, what the parents are needing, what the grandparents are needing, what the community at large is needing. And those are very good insights to have. And I would say for anyone who is willing to serve, being undervalued in the way that we know teachers are, then these are probably the right people to be putting in place to be good stewards of tax dollars, of our public offerings and agencies and the like. So I see a lot of fruit and good opportunity in this, and I'm really excited about it.
I'm excited for you, Shivy. Can you tell us a little bit about the Atlanta public school system being in New York? I can imagine that there are some similarities, but also some wide differences. I just have some quick stats here, and the first is that currently 75% of all Atlanta public school students are living in poverty. And then we have some other stats in terms of the performance of students. We have about 28 that are math proficient compared to 36 in Georgia overall, and then 35% that are reading on grade level compared to 39 in Georgia. So we have, in both cases, only about a third of students performing on grade level. So the question is, what is happening with the 70% of students who are not thriving? And what policies would you like to see in place? What best practices and strategies do you think that the board should put a lot of weight behind and a lot of investment in order to change the landscape of achievement in APS?
That's a really good question. And I think it is, I will first say I have many recommendations for how we can make it better. I won't proclaim to be the person who can save us all and fix it. What I know is this. Atlanta has one of the worst wealth disparity gaps, has the worst wealth disparity gap in the country.
Wow.
There is a statistic that says if a child is born in poverty in Atlanta, they have a 4% chance of having upward mobility out of poverty.
Wow.
4%. The average household income for a black family in Atlanta is $28,000 compared to our white counterparts at $87,000. It has a lot to do with even how the racial demographics are seen within our city. Our city is now 49% black, 47% white, but our schools, as you referred to, are 72% black,
right.
which tells you that we are going against forces at the state level that make doing school more challenging at the local level.
So the public schools in Atlanta are segregated.
Absolutely.
Because if 72% of the students in APS are black, what schools are the white kids going to?
So many of these students are choosing to either homeschool or go to private schools. And so we are seeing many families that if they were invested in Atlanta public schools, if our neighborhood schools were the choice schools that they should be, we're losing the opportunity to have those kids be a part of the Atlanta public school village. Instead, they're going to the Woodwards and the Padeas and going to some of the other private schools. And then at the state level, they're working to enact policies to create voucher programs, which would take the FTE dollars away, but then replace it with $6,500 that they would give to a family towards a private school tuition that might cost you $30,000,
right.
And then call that school choice.
And also that hasn't worked in the past. There have been many districts, I think Baltimore was one,
Yep.
Where these voucher systems were implemented in the past, and it just created further disparities,
Correct.
more segregation.
Correct.
And private schools are a product of institutional racism and white flight from public schools, white flight from cities. So,
and that's what we're seeing in Atlanta right now. And I believe that when we invest better in our educators, right, and that gives us the opportunity to pick the cream of the crop of educators throughout the metro Atlanta area. When we invest in our young people, providing activities and things for them between the hours of 4 to 8, when we provide more access to tutoring for our young people, if we have more partnership between our senior community and our young people to help increase our literacy rates, I believe those are just some of the low-hanging fruit that we can be addressing to make a big shift. As an educator, I personally find that literacy is the stratifier. It is the thing that changes whether a child is here or if a child goes up here. And so if we could get our young people reading for fun, if we could work against policies that prevent them from reading books that include characters who look like them, if we have school boards that are courageous and intentional about young people seeing themselves in literature and having an adoration for it, then we will actually go a long way towards changing our outcomes in our schools. I also want to acknowledge that there's been growth too. Atlanta public schools have an 83% graduation rate at this point, which is the highest it's ever been in the history of Atlanta public schools. So there is good work happening, but we have to do more for sure, and especially as it goes towards protecting our neighborhood schools, as we're constantly in Atlanta experiencing these redistrictings, these proposed mergers of schools and closures of schools, and it tends to be that the schools in communities that look like us are the first ones to be closed. And I want to put a stop to that because I believe there are many, many opportunities, whether it be public-private partnerships, whether it be protecting our school populations, in particular neighborhoods, that we have to do the right things by these neighborhood schools. Atlanta is a city of neighborhoods, and many of our schools have a lot of historic value, and they should be treated and respected as such.
I heard you speak about texts that allow for representation, allow for radical inclusivity. So I have a question for you regarding that. in terms of social studies and language arts. What are your views? I don't want to say the controversial term.
Right. What, the CRT stuff?
Oh my gosh, that term. People are so afraid of that term.
Oh, we call it, Georgia calls it divisive topics.
So divisive.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are your views on how social studies and language arts, how they should be taught in schools?
Yeah. Honestly, I think if and when we go into, especially those two subject matters, honestly, we become a better community. We become a stronger community. And we hold ourselves accountable for the change we deserve to see. As a active teacher, I know what it feels like to show up in my classroom and talk about topics that maybe the law says I shouldn't. I know what it feels like to bring in books that may be on a list that says they shouldn't be there, but still doing it afraid. And I think in the classroom and on our boards, we need people who are courageous, who are willing to do the right thing even when others say differently. And we need to be unafraid, unapologetic, and intentional about that. And that's what I plan to do when I receive the opportunity to serve on the Atlanta Public School Board, is making sure that we have policies that will protect our young people to be able to learn authentic experiences about people who look like them and things that our people have gone through. And knowing that they have a safe haven in the city of Atlanta to be able to do so until they graduate and go on to do great things.
Awesome. Thank you, Shivy. So speaking about the board, what are some initiatives that you think, in recent years, the board has really excelled with, and in what ways can you leverage your strengths to be a value add to some of those initiatives?
Yeah, I think Atlanta has done a really good job at bringing technology into our schools and giving our kids access to STEM opportunities. For me, having the privilege of a national or international platform to be able to tap into resources, whether it be individuals or corporations or businesses, entrepreneurs or social good doers, being able to use those partnerships to create more access for our young people, I think is going to be a game changer. Beyond that, I also think that a lot of times districts or schools deal with issues that sometimes a partnership could change the whole game, but we lack the reach to have the ask be heard. And I think with my platform and that position of leadership, there will be no needs that we won't be able to meet. Because even if we don't have the ability within the board, I believe we can put out the ask that would garner us the partnerships we need to actually, make the change we want.
Awesome. Speaking of your national reach, how have you supported schools, organizations outside of APS this past year?
Right. So I've gotten the opportunity to do a lot of consulting work and on the ground work with schools throughout the country. So I've done work with schools in California or in LA or here in New York or here at your school, and serving in a role where I'm helping schools to understand the importance of branding, utilizing social media, telling their own stories and their own narratives, the ability to attract, gain and retain educators, which is something we really need right now as we are dealing with this national teacher shortage. School systems are so they have a new responsibility to market themselves to applicants in a way that maybe they didn't before. And so knowing how to tell the good news about what's happening, I think is a skill set that will change things. A lot of times schools are doing great things, but they're not telling the story well. And so the neighborhoods and everyone on the outside gets to create the narrative, and it may be counter to what is actually happening. But if we do a better job at sharing what we are doing, why it works, how it works, we could improve the public trust. We could bring in perhaps some of those folks who were considering going elsewhere. And then we can start having full buy-in from all of our community members, which I think is going to help us all rise to the top together.
What are some practices that you've seen in LA and NYC that you would like to transplant back and widely apply to the APS?
I've seen, and all districts are different, right? Everyone has different protocol and policies. But I do find that for some schools that have a little bit more autonomy over how they're going to invest in resources needed for their kids, that flexibility, I think, helps to answer needs a lot more efficiently than some of the systems and ways that we have now. I also think there needs to be investment in teacher consulting, right? So like a lot of times school leaders, they get the opportunity to have a consultant or have someone that helps them professionally. And while we may have instructional coaches and folks like that in the school, there's a lot of hard work in teaching that has to be addressed. And I think that there are some people very well suited, and this is some of the work that I've done in other schools. But you have individuals who are able to dialogue with an educator to understand kind of where their headspace and heart space is, and maybe be able to give them those tidbits or nuggets that they need so they can show up in a way that's going to be more beneficial for their kids, almost social emotional learning, if you will, for the educator. I believe we have to be more intentional about that, because we got folks that really understand curriculum but don't understand connecting.
Right. Agreed.
And if you cannot connect,
right,
you can't teach. You can't be effective at teaching. And that's something an instructional coach is not necessarily equipped to give you. Right. So I see opportunity there.
Yeah, there's a website called Visible Learning MetaX, and it's a platform that tracks all of the research related to education and achievement that have been published to date. And there's mega studies and then smaller studies. And it tracks like factors related to achievement. And one surprising factor is that if a student believes, and I guess it's not surprising, but if a student believes that the teacher doesn't like them, that student's achievement in the class declines. Yep. That is one of only 3 factors that have been researched that actually have a negative impact. Everything else, if it's above 0, it has some sort of impact, but if it's about or if 0.41, it has significant impact. That actually has negative impact. If you think your teacher doesn't like you, your teacher's not interested in you, your teacher's just there for the check, you're actually less likely to tune into that teacher.
And we all know kids don't learn from people they don't like.
They do not. They do not. So that's super important.
Yes.
Shivy, I want to talk a little bit about the Bryce Brooks Foundation.
Yeah.
If you can tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing with the foundation and how it connects with your role in schools.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. As a family, in spiritually responding to the transition of our son, we had to be intentional about how to turn this pain into purpose. And for us, my wife was a swim team member in high school. She was a swim instructor and lifeguard at the YMCA's when she was a young person and through college. And I did exactly the same thing. The experience of losing your child to a drowning, especially in the act of saving others, is one of those things that, for us coming from where we came from, we realized the need in our community that I think a lot of us don't talk about, which is that 80% of Black folks can't swim. And for many Black adults, when we start openly talking about it, we kind of ashamedly go, yeah, I actually can't swim. And then you realize how prevalent it is among us. But now, it's also not our fault. There are systemic rationale as to why that has happened. Black folks were not legally allowed to swim in public pools until 1971. That's our parents. I was born in '84, right? That's 13 years before I was born, and no one except my students is calling me an old man. So to realize that there are racial or generational reasons as to why there is that gap, learning how to swim is for a Black person was once a means to escape. Right? There's reasons as to why we have what we have, but there's a consequence to it. And that looks like us being the victims of drownings at rates that it shouldn't be. And it looks like situations like what happened with my son, where you're going out to try to retain or save other kids who or not strong or we're not good at swimming or don't understand natural water safety. And then we saw a need there. So our foundation is creating funding that will provide free swim lessons for children and adults in the city of Atlanta and beyond. We'll provide for free lifeguard certifications for high school students in the city of Atlanta. And then we're doing college scholarships. So we just gave away 6 college scholarships for the Bryce Brooks Hero Scholarship. And we'll be awarding them next month on July 9th in Atlanta. So now, you know, what my son has taught us is that heroism happens every day. It happens through everyday people, and it should be named, it should be highlighted, and it should be celebrated. And so that is the work that we're doing with our son's name to continue to save lives with this foundation. And for me, if I could help that 80% become 30%, I would have felt like, you know, we've done our job.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Shivy, and I'm so sorry about the loss of Bryce.
It's been a very tough thing to experience and live through. Trust me, I wish I could opt out, you know, but we are here. And truth be told, I think this experience has taught me so much more about myself and about others, about what actually does matter, about how to stay focused and not be distracted. And so ultimately I'm living through this with gratitude, even though it's challenging to do. And my hope is that I'll make my son proud, and that we live up to God's promise for us and how we navigate this, and perhaps offering a lighted path for others as to how to navigate grief, how to turn pain into purpose, and also to be free of believing that people are ours to have, instead of being ours to cherish.
Love that. Thank you so much. I wonder, you speak about turning, finding purpose in pain, taking action post-crisis. What do you think is missing in schools in terms of responsiveness to trauma, recognizing everyday heroes, whether they be kids or they're the teachers or they're the culture team members? How will you take this, you know, very raw experience of losing Bryce and make the most of the lessons that you've learned through this time in your role or in your future aspirations as a board member?
Wow, that's a really deep question. I think for many of us, we believe the things that we have, or the things that we acquire, or our achievements become what defines us. You know, I remember stressing my son over like college and positioning himself to be able to get a full academic scholarship, positioning himself to be able to get a car he wants, positioning himself to get the shoes and the this and the that and all of these things. I remember getting so frustrated with my son, feeling like he wasn't being intentional enough or moving fast enough, or so many of these things that as parents we're just kind of all the time, right? But in my son's transition, I found that never once am I ruminating or thinking about any of those things that gave me so much anxiety as a parent. None of it matters. And I think as a people and as a culture, we need like a recalibration as to what matters, what does matter. So in our schools, and I saw for myself, like I wasn't able to go back and return in the classroom from spring break, and schools closed a week ago for us in Georgia. I lost my train of thought. Where was I?
You weren't able to return back to the classrooms after his transition.
I wasn't able to return to the classroom, and I think about how many of my students experience losing a sibling, experience losing a parent, experience losing friends. I mean, I've not had one school year where I did not lose a child to gun violence, ever. And so I think about like the friends of those students. I think about the siblings of those students. And it's like, there's this expectation that they just keep chugging along. And it's like, where are we creating intentional safe spaces, healing spaces, for these young people? If I know that I did not feel equipped to go back into the classroom and serve after my son's transition, then how do we still have that same expectation for some of our young people? And then what are we doing to meet them where maybe they need to be met? Are we offering perhaps some type of homeschooling bridge situation till they return? Are we being creative or innovative to be as empathetic as we can to the experiences of our young people? I think especially when you served in underserved areas, the high level of empathy and intentionality towards the traumas that are experienced on a normalized basis has to be there. Because we are not only having to be focused on teaching young people and their learning, we have to be focused on their development and the curation of their character. And if we continue to ignore the emotional side, the spiritual side, the internal side, then I think we're really missing what actually does matter. My son was an honor roll student who a lot of people regarded as like the good student. But in him being gone, that's not the bragging right. The bragging right is his character. The bragging right is what would make him choose to be so selfless. And so my question is, if we realized how important that is, then why don't schools prioritize that? How much focus on character and community and relationship building and soft skills? How much emphasis are we actually putting on that? And are we doing enough? Are we coaching our young people to be excellent at conflict resolution? Right? We talk so much about gun violence in our communities, but we don't teach young people how to navigate conflict. So a lot of our issues have everything to do with our omission from things that matter. What actually matters? And I think the character of our young people has to be that thing that we start to emphasize.
Thank you, Shivy.
Thank you.
So it looks like we will look forward to hearing you or seeing you bring that conversation to APS school board in terms of the competencies that we place value on as we are thinking about what students need to leave our primary and secondary school systems with in order to be thriving community members. Are these competencies related to literacy and numeracy, or are these competencies related to bravery, selflessness, community activism? Does it have to be either or can it be an amalgam? That is the conversation that is needed to have.
I love that.
Thank you. So thank you so much. This is Jam Talk, powered by Teach Jam. I am the instructional savage, and we were so blessed for a very riveting, powerful conversation with Shivy Brooks.
Thank you.
Thank you.